Okay, first review in the new year. Gotta do something big, something fresh, something relevant, a big ticket item that every Transformer collector will have their eye on this year. Well, Hasbro did recently come out with a Commander Class toy of a classic Autobot leader. It's perfect! My first review in the new year should be Kingdom Rodimus Prime. Look, Ultra Magnus was sold out. This is the best I can do right now. While Transformers Kingdom was billed as a line celebrating the Beast Wars, a surprising number of G1 characters ended up getting toys in that line, including, weirdly enough, that year's Commander Class release, Rodimus Prime. I've heard it speculated that the line was originally meant to be an 86 movie-based line, and that the Beast Wars anniversary caused them to change their plans, but I find this somewhat questionable since only a small fraction of the G1 toys in Kingdom were movie original characters. So I have no clue why he ended up in Kingdom. All I know is that we have a Commander Rodimus. Let's see if he lives up to the $90 asking price. Rodimus Prime himself transforms into what designer Yuya Onishi describes as a more SUV-style take on G1 Hot Rod's car mode. In practice, it's essentially a beefed-up, slightly boxier version of the Hot Rod car, with much more ground clearance and a massive rear spoiler. It's an unusual take on the design, but I think it works for Rodimus. It feels like a more powerful version of his original car mode, which fits with how Rodimus Prime is usually depicted as simply a bigger and stronger version of Hot Rod. I think what sells it for me is the rear section. It's this massive chunk of bulk, and with the big vents on the front side, it looks like a massive engine compartment that could supply some serious horsepower. I've talked before about how these figures like adding a bunch of techie detail, but this one goes a step beyond. Apart from the windshield and hood, there is not a single smooth surface on this vehicle. It's a far cry from what I'd expect for a Hot Rod, but Rodimus Prime wears it well. Even the spoiler is covered in panel lining, like it's some super sophisticated piece of racing tech rather than a simple airfoil. Deco-wise, it's about what you'd expect. Obviously, you get the flame deco on the hood, done in orange and yellow. There's no exposed engine block here, and instead the flame deco extends all the way to the window line. That is accurate for Rodimus Prime, as will become more prominent later. The exhaust pipes are painted silver naturally, and of course the spoiler is done in yellow with a strip of orange down the middle. It's actually cast in the same clear blue plastic as the windshield and then painted over, so it might be a little delicate. I haven't heard any reports of random breakage though, so I think the biggest concern should just be paint chipping. One thing I can't understand though is why they used a red paint to highlight the rear vents. It's so similar to the base plastic color that I didn't even notice it for the longest time. For features in this mode, he of course can roll. Tolerances may vary of course. In my case, the front left wheel doesn't spin as freely, and the front right wheel doesn't always stay fully extended. But in general, you can get all four wheels to touch the ground and roll smoothly with little effort. There's also weapon storage in this mode. Beneath the spoiler, you'll find two 5mm ports, perfectly spaced to fit his folded-up rifle, and on the underside of the car, you'll find a pair of tabs which can be used to mount his sword. And don't worry, there's plenty of ground clearance for it. And on the subject of accessories, there are 3mm posts on the end of his exhaust pipes where you can attach the included smoke effect pieces. Theoretically. The pegs on my copy are too thick, and the effect parts just don't want to stay on. And that's about all you get from the base vehicle mode. But those familiar with Rodimus Prime know that this is only one piece of the package. Like any self-respecting Autobot leader, Rodimus Prime includes a trailer. Simply sliding the car into the gap in the front until you hear a click gives you the complete truck mode. This is probably where you should be most worried about the spoiler, since it rubs up against a good amount of plastic here. What we have here is essentially a gigantic version of G1 Rodimus Prime's futuristic RV mode. Seriously, this thing is around a foot long. That's as big as Galaxy Convoy. If you have any plans to display this toy with a trailer, you're gonna need a lot of shelf space. That said, it's a pretty direct upscaling. It's got the wedge-shaped overhang, the sloping channels along the back, even the random square bump is there on top. The only real difference seems to be how stretched out it is. And of course, the extra molded detail. But even that is much more restrained here. There are large patches of smooth plastic, with only some spots of added tech detail. Paint deco seems a bit sparse, at least at first. You get some orange and yellow details on the roof, some small red details on the side skirts, and the flame tampografs on the side. If you look a little more closely, you might also realize that the pipes on the sides are painted silver. But that's really all the detail you get. Of course, that's all the detail you got on the G1 toy as well, so there's very little missing. The most I could ask for was the extra yellow and orange across the overhang that they added for the cartoon, but he still looks fine without it. The trailer makes up for its lack of paint with a surprising level of function. There's a compartment on the overhang that flips open to reveal a space for you to store small items. And going around to the back, there's an opening hatch with moving dampers that reveals a flip-out ramp. And there's space inside the trailer for one typical deluxe Autobot car, so you can drive one of his teammates up the ramp and into the trailer. At least, as long as the trailer is empty. The big downside to this is that, at least on my copy, the door doesn't want to close all the way just from pushing it down. I have to fiddle with these little tabs holding the dampers in place to get it to all close up nicely. The smoke effect parts also fit on the trailer's pipes and hold on much better here. Alternatively, there are also some 5mm ports on the very back of the trailer in case you wanted a jet-powered truck. Also, on some copies of the toy, the trailer likes to split down the middle slightly. I can usually get mine to stay closed, but not always. It seems there was a running change to fix this though, so yours might not have this problem. All told, this is a very solid update to the G1 Rodimus Prime vehicle. Not only is the truck mode recreated faithfully, but for the first time ever, he has a unique independent vehicle mode that still fits the character. The conversion is where the figure starts to really show its Commander budget. It starts the way you'd expect, with the spoiler and canopy popping up, but then things take a turn when the sides of the car untab from the bottom of the hood and fold out on long armatures. After that, we need to get the hood and canopy out of the way to spin the arms 180 degrees. Once this is done, the armatures fold up on themselves and lock into place, forming the sides of the robot. Now to form the arms themselves, it's basically just a matter of unfolding some panels to expose the hands, flipping the exhaust pipes around, and folding those panels back up to tidy up the arms. There are a couple finishing touches though. First, you extend the forearms slightly to free up all the joints, and second, you open up the side of the wheel, push it into the fender, and then tab the wheel panel into the shoulder. Yes, the wheels themselves actually transform. Don't think I've ever seen that on a Transformer before. Ironically, the part that gives me the most trouble is the legs, which are conceptually the simplest part. They unfold on a double hinge, and then the rear wheels fold in to fill the resulting void space. The trouble is that even with the wheel collapsed and a notch specifically molded for it in the rear panel hinge, the fit is extremely tight. And even after all that, the panels don't like to stay tabbed in. Finally, we go back to the torso. Once some excess car bits are folded away, the hood collapses up to form the robot chest. Make sure the gray section clicks into place, otherwise things will not line up when we bring the canopy into position and clip it into place. It's a really tight connection, which kind of scares me considering it's connected to a piece of clear plastic. But once it's all together, finishing the robot mode is as simple as tabbing the spoiler into place on his back and rotating the neck around. This is a very strong Rodimus Prime design. Like most WFC toys, he basically looks like the G1 cartoon model, but with a lot of extra sculpted detail. There's some intricate panel lining across his shoulders, some more basic panel lining across his pelvis and thighs, and a ton of technological detail on his boots. Not only does this make him more interesting to look at, but it also harkens back to his original toy. Especially on the shins, a lot of the molding is reminiscent of the sticker details the original figure had. There are even slots molded in where the wheels were on the G1 toy. The only part that I really find questionable is the head sculpt. It's trying to capture that older Hot Rod look the animation model had, but it's just that little bit off that takes it from looking mature to outright geriatric. I think it's the cheek structure that does this. They are way too high set, and the eyes are too sunken in. It makes him look old and tired rather than gruff and chiseled. I guess it could work for a distant future version of Rodimus, but it doesn't really represent the original character model. The paint job is very predictable once again. Plastic colors are doing most of the work here, with paint mostly being used for supplemental details. In addition to the hood chest and the forearm exhaust pipes, you get silver paint taps on the shoulders, orange and yellow on the wrist cuffs, and more of that imperceptibly different red paint on his head, trying very hard to set the crest detail apart from the helmet. You get a similar effect on his pelvis, where it tries to bring out the classic skirt shapes. But again, the paint color is so similar to the base plastic that it doesn't really work. There also seems to be a bit of slop with how the orange paint was applied. In almost every spot where it was used, it formed some big globs that really stick out, especially when those globs spill over onto parts of different colors. This is bad enough before you realize that the thighs are covered entirely in orange paint. They came out a little nicer than the rest, but even here there are some small globs on the back, and the paint has started chipping off. Mileage may vary, of course, but the fact that this is a problem across the toy does not bode well for other copies. Things start looking up again, though, when we get to articulation. The neck is on a ball joint, and that ball joint is on a hinge inside the torso. The shoulders are kind of universal, but the outward pivot is in the torso instead of the shoulder, so it's a little limited. On the plus side, you do get a butterfly joint that is absolutely deliberate and not at all an artifact of the transformation, and a double-jointed elbow with a swivel in between. The wrists rotate, fold inwards, and the fingers are articulated at 2 points with an independent pointer finger. The waist does swivel, though the backpack kind of gets in the way. The hips are universal and integrated into the pelvis, though you still have skirts on the sides. The thighs swivel, knees are double jointed, and the ankles pivot both forward and inward. So there's no real limit to the amount of poses you can put this guy in. That is, if you know how to work the shoulders. Now let's get into accessories. Strap in because we're gonna be here a while. First up is his Photon Eliminator Rifle, the weapon Rodimus' original toy came with, and his main weapon from the cartoon. This version of the rifle, though, seems to be based primarily on the one that came with his Masterpiece toy. The back end is shaped almost exactly like one of Hot Rod's individual photon lasers, the fins on the front are much larger, and the hinge section is even shaped like the track section for the Masterpiece version's combination gimmick. A strange choice to be sure, but you still get a very accurate recreation of the original rifle, so it kind of just boils down to a neat little Easter egg. The gun has two 5mm handles, which fit nicely into his hands. Thankfully, the thumb is shaped just right to securely hold the gun on its own, so the finger articulation won't affect his gripping ability. Getting him to hold it two-handed is a bit of a challenge, but it is doable, and he doesn't look half bad doing it. Or, if you don't want him holding it, you can still store it in the same spot under his spoiler. But that isn't his only weapon. Also included in this set is the Sword of Primus. This is such a deep cut that I wouldn't be surprised if some of you didn't even know what that is. I certainly had to look it up. This is a sword wielded by Rodimus in Regeneration 1, IDW's continuation of the Marvel G1 comics. It's kind of off-model here, though. The blade shape is a little more complex than the simple leaf blade from the comics, and it has a fork-shaped crossguard rather than hemispherical. The hilt is also black instead of gold. Still, it's a neat-looking sword, and I think most people who know the reference will at least be able to tell what it's going for. I especially like the panel lines across the blade. They really help accentuate the shape. While the handle is 5mm, the pommel means you can't just slide it into the fist hole like a typical sword. Instead, you need to open his fingers up and snap it in like a C-clip. It's a very secure connection, and the arm articulation gives you a pretty good range of poses with it. And if you want to store it, you can flip a 5mm post out either side and store it on his back. And of course, you can open up his chest to reveal the Matrix of Leadership stored inside. It's cast in clear blue plastic, painted over with silver and gold paint to give it the correct look. The center crystal is light-piped, and it glows pretty nicely when you hold it up to a light. Getting it out of the Matrix chamber is a bit awkward, at least on my copy, but once it's out, he can hold it in his hands. Kind of. At least in the classic two-handed style, the best way to do it is to hook it over his thumbs, fold the fingers over it, and hope the fingers stay in place while you get everything situated. If they do, you can get a very nice Light Our Darkest Hour pose, but if they don't, it's gonna fall out of his hands, so you better keep a close eye on it or you might lose it. Also, there's a port on the back of the Matrix that does absolutely nothing. It's too small for a 5mm post, and it's too wide for a 3mm post, so it doesn't work with the combat system in any way. There isn't even a peg for it inside the chest, it's only held in by the handles, so I really don't see why it's there. On the plus side, you do get an effect part that clips over the core to recreate the Matrix glow. And yes, he can still hold it, but not as effectively. Speaking of effect parts, you also get 7 Fire Blast effects, recolored from the parts included with Siege Omega Supreme. They're cast in blue plastic and completely unpainted, creating a vivid appearance. 3 of them are the exact same, just simple flames, but the rest are all distinct pieces that can either stand on their own as differently concentrated blasts, or stacked on top of each other to create a massive explosion effect. Granted, it's difficult to find a toy at Rodimus' scale that can hold up the full stack, but if you spread them out, they can add quite a lot to any battle diorama. Well, that's the figure itself covered. Now let's take another look at that trailer. Just like the G1 toy, the trailer opens up to form Rodimus Prime's mobile defense bay. Be mindful of the pipes when doing the big split though. They're supposed to fold out on a spring-loaded hinge, but they tend to get caught and stop things from opening up. Once fully transformed, the mobile defense bay is a very solid recreation of the original toy's base mode, but with some upgrades. Mainly, there are a ton of 5mm ports across the inside, so you can mount a bunch of extra weapons. There are even ports spaced just right for you to mount the Photon Eliminator. There's also an airlock connector at the end of the ramp, so you can combine it with any modulators or other compatible baseformers you may have. Though you might have to reconfigure some things to make it accessible in this mode. Of course, the centerpiece of the whole thing is the turret in the middle. It lacks the vertical extension of the G1 toy, but now the blast shields are integrated and fold out on hinges rather than being separate pieces. The turret itself can rotate, as well as aim up and down, and the base is ratcheted so it can support its own weight. And despite lacking the extension, Rodimus can still man the cannons. There are even handles for him to grab onto. But the coolest addition to the whole thing is that the turret can detach and serve as an independent unit. This is what I meant when I said the trailer had to be empty to store a car inside. With the turret in place, there's just no room. It has treads molded into the sides, but there are no wheels for it to roll on. But on the plus side, it does have a flip-out strut that allows it to sit level on the ground when collapsed. Alternatively, you can mount it on Rodimus's back to give him a weapons pack, if that's something you want. Oh, and the cherry on top? There's a slide-out tray on the bottom of the trailer where you can store the Matrix and exhaust effect parts, as well as anything else you can fit in there. This is the single most thoughtful feature I have ever seen on a Transformer. Sure, most toys have some level of accessory storage, but adding a hidden compartment specifically designed for the effect parts, that is definitely a step up. Now the big question, is this figure worth $90? Well, considering the level of articulation, the complexity of the transformation, the functionality of the trailer, the number of accessories, and the overall size of the package, I would say that the price is warranted. Whether it's worth spending that price is a bit more subjective. The trailer might not do it for you, or maybe the blast effects strike you as cheap. But even just looking at the base figure, I don't think there's any argument that he's at least worth more than a liter. And at that point, there's really no option but to bump him up to Commander. The only complaints I can think to offer, at least design-wise, are that I wish he had more standard shoulder joints, and that the leg transformation should have been smoother. Aside from that, he's just about perfect. Add in a trailer that takes the original design and improves upon it in every way, an incredibly deep-cut reference for Regeneration 1 fans, and all the bonus effect parts, I feel like my money was very well spent. You're at your best when the going gets tough. You've been put to the test, but it's never enough. You got the touch. You got the power. When all hell's breaking loose, you'll be right in the eye of the storm. You got the the heart. You got the motion. You know that when things get too tough,